Inspirational. He is an inspirational captain. Beast. It is the nature of the beast. Surrounding. Tools on the page let viewers zoom in on the city and its surroundings in great detail. Composure. Roddick double faults but manages to keep his composure. Snake. Metal Gear Solid. Snake Eater. Surf. Without protection. These kinds of programs can be picked up just through surfing the web normally. Thief. Rich pickings for high-tech thieves. Dictionary. Blogs had a huge year, with a top US dictionary naming blog word of 2004. Surfing. The Dell provides enough power and software for basic gaming and internet surfing. Squash. Our DVDs that we put out today have to be squashed down to about 5 or 6 megabits per second. Rewind. The set can pause and rewind TV for up to 90 hours. Obsessive. Only a fraction will descend into obsessives. Ecosystem. Last year, he said, was all about deal-making and partnering up, shaping the IPTV ecosystem. Implicate. But Deshi is fuming that she has been implicated in the row. Manipulation. This is just another example of record company manipulation to keep an artist in the public eye. Misleading. Why it needed a rebrand I don't know, as the name is misleading. Flock. Voters flock to blog awards site. Penetration. Giggs was a tremendous threat and he brings tremendous penetration. Turbulent. A new law to govern its turbulent banking system is on the cards. Shun. Green reports shun supply chain. Collude. They colluded with it. Unpopular. It added that government reforms, including unpopular benefit cuts, do not go far enough. Fraction. Only a fraction will descend into obsessives. Accessory. Sales of t-shirts, accessories and action figures have rocketed since the Osbournes hit screens. Voucher. Vouchers to cut winter deaths. Embezzlement. The official Xinhua news agency said the arrest was linked to alleged embezzlement. Refuge. U.S. to rule on UCAS refuge call. Sand. There's no use burying your head in the sand. We know we are going to get a lot of criticism. Shipping. China's energy shortage influenced global prices for oil, coal and shipping last year. Overlap. Each image was made to slightly overlap so they could be accurately arranged into a composite. Peril. Our nation is in peril here, said Ahmed Shahid, the chief government spokesman. Dump. Rather than just a place to dump your pictures, it's about sharing them. Grapple. The world's biggest car maker is grappling with losses in its European business, and weak US sales. Silk. He didn't let me use the silk futon, saying it's a luxury. Fleet. Failure to make cutbacks may also push it to reduce its fleet, the group said. Distort. He distorts reality to serve his own prejudice against New Labour. Oversight. They are among 10 new names being considered by the Net's oversight body. Smoothly. It certainly looks impressive on the small machine and plays smoothly even with a group of people. Devaluation. The subsequent devaluation saw thousands of people's life savings disappear. Steep. But opposition parties said rebanding of council taxes would mean steep rises. Drift. For the U.S. government, letting the dollar drift is a useful short-term fix. Derive. Now we're getting words that derive from it such as blogosphere and so on, he said. Bleak. Still, some measures suggest the picture is not quite so bleak. Jam. We're something like an electronic jam session. Mourn. Chancellor Gordon Brown said the former PM would be mourned throughout the world. Conducive. Oracle has an edgy, aggressive atmosphere that's not conducive to innovative production. Nicotine. Manipulated nicotine levels to increase addiction. Trough. With profits, policies are designed to smooth out the peaks and troughs of stock market volatility. Grim. The haunting, grim landscapes become strangely beautiful. Blessing. It's a blessing. Seizure. The Vesti Group said it had not been informed of any planned seizure. Glance. At a glance. Tory health checks. Ceiling. There is a glass ceiling on opportunity in this country. Overdue. Mr. Catwilla added. This is long overdue. Dissolve. Tony Blair is tipped to ask the Queen on Monday to dissolve Parliament, ready for a May 5 poll. Printing. The Telegraph Group says the cuts are needed to fund an £150 million investment in new printing facilities. Occasional. Mr. Prescott said there were occasional disagreements in any government. Memorandum. Satyanarayana said he expected VW to co-sign a memorandum of agreement. Conceive. I was 18 when she was conceived. Cattle. You can be sold like cattle. Bode. This does not bode well for U.S. influence in the world. Ethical. But fertility expert Lord Winston said he thought it was rather good ministers held ethical views. Resurgence. During the same quarter, Yahoo earned $187 million, again tipping a resurgence in online advertising. Sugar. Announced a package for the sugar industry. Convey. Those bids were then conveyed to Marsh clients under false and fraudulent pretenses. Symbolic. It is symbolic of our independence from the old colonial ways. Risky. These are less risky for employers. Binding. The decision in both cases will be final and binding. Crystal. Mr. Pearson does not have a crystal ball. Unrest. Poverty heightens the likelihood of conflict and unrest. Bottleneck. Audi said it had been hit by production bottlenecks, due to a shortage of unaffected Bosch parts. Brew. And she added that the opening chapter of the book had been brewing in her mind for 13 years. Unravel. It's been unraveling in the House of Commons, it may unravel further. Absurd. It is so absurd that it borders on the humorous. Batch. Winners were unaffected as a new batch was rushed out. Catalyst. As the interval approached, wing Josh Lucy was the catalyst for England's most promising attack. Recourse. After all, he has no public recourse to criticism. Vanish. Coal has now totally vanished and textiles are struggling. Tidal. Traders ignored the possible effects of Asia's tidal waves on global supplies. Minimal. U.S. insurers are likely to have only minimal to no exposure. Thereby, some businesses may even gain from the reconstruction efforts, thereby creating jobs. Benign. In its most benign form, it just bombards users with pop-up adverts or hijacks web browser settings. Miracle. There's no miracle answer. Therapy. U.S. politicians and citizens of all political persuasions are in for a dose of shock therapy. Pedal. I bring everything back to me. Steering wheel. Steering column. Gear lever and pedals. Sentimental. It's a mediocre, sentimental and safe song. Empowerment. But the work's author, U.S. playwright Eve Ensler, says it is all about women's empowerment. Amass. Janes amassed a fortune of $24 million from his sales. Prosecutors said. Forefront. Economic issues, as well as the war in Iraq, were the forefront of the campaign. Barn. Please click on the link to the right here to see my ideas for Marianne's barn. Multitude. Working from home presents a multitude of challenges. Rigid. It may be useful to be quite rigid about who is allowed to visit, and to keep strict office hours. Interior. It looks like the visual design of the device interior does not consider this need. Desk. Even if he was working out 3 months' notice, he should have been clearing his desk by now. Vicious. Japan can either drive some radical reforms or else run the risk of a vicious aging recession. Variation. The result is that now there are more than 3,000 variations of the spybot worm. Passive. I knew I had to stay very calm and passive. You cannot fight 6 men. Dumb. He assumed the dumb name. Stan Lee. Now legally adopted. Professionally. It gave me a start professionally. Intimate. The clearest signals come when all indicators are pointing the same direction. Ms. Lomax intimated. Standpoint. I become obsessed to complete the goal. So from that standpoint it is an addiction. Trump. Without a confession, the prisoners will get a minimal sentence on some trumped-up charge. Pray. The comparatively weak economic data preyed on shares with the Nikkei down 1% in afternoon trade. Flatter. The scoreline flattered them and we could have had 1 or 2 more goals. Chop. You might find that you want to chop and change quite quickly. Longevity. Of Hepburn, she said, the longevity of her career is inspiring to everyone. Reminder. It would also be a timely reminder to Mike Ruddock as to what they can do. Instability. There is an inherent instability at the moment. Spiral. You definitely feel like is he doing too much of a two-pack spiral, like me against the world. Symptom. Many patients already smoke cannabis to relieve their symptoms. Stellar. 2004 was a stellar year, said Roger Bennett, Director General of ELSPA. Proxy. The site can also be seen using anonymous proxy services that are based in the US. Atmospheric. Those songs took the band's epic, atmospheric sound to a simple, powerful and popular pinnacle. Surreal. It is always surreal, and when it is nice, he said. Orphan. As the women die, the number of Rwanda's orphans rises. Disco. Reggae did not correspond with disco in the 70s. Vivid. They were 2 wonderful years and I still have vivid memories of the experiences and friends I had. Pregnancy. Lucy's mother kept her pregnancy secret and had her adopted at 4 weeks. Devil. We're going to watch him make a pact with the devil, Lucas said. Stranger. And Bikel is no stranger to overhauling world marks at the National Indoor Arena. Sensation. Soul sensation ready for awards. Gigantic. Internet piracy of computer software remains a gigantic problem. Technician. As sound technicians rushed to fix it, other band members did their best to improvise. We improvised quite a lot, says Bernath. Translation. U.S. film Lost in Translation won the award for Best Foreign Feature. Overdose. He died of drug overdose in 1970 at the age of 27. Supernatural. Keanu Reeves' supernatural thriller Constantine dropped a place to 3. Rude. Walmart is sued over rude lyrics. Protagonist. If the rest of the party can enforce that, they'll have the protagonists retreating pretty quickly. Mantle. Sky takes over Oscar night mantle. Shelter. We built shelters that would have sheltered nothing. Convenience. The number 1 reason now is convenience. Inaugural. He lifted the inaugural Lit Idol Prize after reading aloud an excerpt of his work Northwest Passage. Autograph. Gear. 55. Greeted the crowd and signed autographs, accompanied by his wife Carrie Lowell. Stun. Venus stunned by Farina Alia. Butler. Butler strikes gold in Spain. Boxer. Swank triumphed for playing a gutsy female boxer in $1 Million Baby. Cinematography. The Aviator's other awards came for cinematography, film editing, art direction and costume design. Hilarious. She said. Yeah, it's hilarious. Because your masochistic baby did leave you. Humane. Jobs have continued to increase since this humane legislation was brought in. Resurrection. His works mixes mysticism, erotica and philosophy through life, death and resurrection. Pie. Has everyone forgot about the Breville pie maker? Idol. Pole idols face first hurdles. Privy. I'm not privy to everybody's diary, he said. Illusion. We will be under no illusions, it is going to be tough for us. Ugly. It could have got really ugly. Gem. There's a host of gaming gems set for release in 2005. Residue. U.S. actor found with gun residue. Censorship. China is believed to extend greater censorship over the net than any other country in the world. Dissatisfied. There may well be a number of dissatisfied customers in the next few months. Pink. UK's National Gallery in the pink. Characteristic. Neurotic has to defend a breakpoint and he produces a characteristic ace to save it. Dare. How dare she? Vacation. So, I think Godzilla just deserves a vacation. Outspoken. But McCreerick has made some enemies with his outspoken views about women. Aloud. Writer Tony Cowell is among the judges who will hear aspiring writers read their work aloud. Spear. Spear seeks aborted tour payment. Bracket. Seeds in brackets. Dreadful. What a dreadful result. Refreshing. The refreshing thing about Robert is that he is open, honest and straight. Coincidentally. Coincidentally, it is also the Armenian term for butcher. Applause. That gets rounds of applause. According to Mr. Gragzik. Lunch. Oscar nominees gear up for lunch. Gatekeeper. But when it comes time to do a movie, he has to go to one of those gatekeepers. Lee said. Despair. Great keep at it, Tony. I remember the despair of the 80s and the low wages employers got away with. Incur. It stated he will incur additional future medical expenses. Bland. Bland even. Distraction. It is simply a distraction from the task in hand. The EU Constitution. Not individual idiocies. Dull. I suppose it's confirmed one thing: the British public are consistently dull. And LT. Jealous. Anybody who says he doesn't deserve it is jealous of his success. Confused. I'm confused. Cardinal. The Cardinal will ask. Cruelty. MPs urged the government to redraft clauses relating to the prosecution of cruelty offences. Emotive. They raised complex and emotive issues which needed to be resolved. MPs said. Combatant. Washington has claimed all four were enemy combatants who trained at camps run by Al-Qaeda. Tide. Mr. Letwin told MPs, the tide is going out on the Chancellor's credibility. Duck. Mr. Cable also accused the Chancellor of ducking tough choices. Dilemma. It is a dilemma, but there is only one choice. Defection. New UKIP defection to Veritas. Functional. This too crams a fully functional phone into a gadget that also plays games. Misconception. He said that was a misconception based on a lack of awareness of the technology. Slum. Brown visits slum on Africa trip. Menace. But anti-spam filters can only be part of the solution to the menace of junk email. Ideological. The ideological differences between Mr. Brown and Mr. Blair remain relatively modest. Sympathy. A total of 53% of those polled said they had sympathy for Mr. Blunkett, with 40% saying they did not. Watershed. There is no watershed on the net, said Mr. Burke. Mimic. Housing Minister Keith Hill said much of the Lib Dem plans mimicked the government's strategy. Undertaking. Mr. Dyer acknowledged that it would be a huge undertaking to update all the world's browsers. Consulate. 9 consulates or consulates general will also be closed, mostly in Europe and America. Essence. He added, in essence, it's a laptop in a biscuit tin, minus the screen and the keyboard. Stalemate. Stalemate in pension strike talks. Ferocity. The scale, the speed, the ferocity of what happened on Boxing Day is difficult to grasp. Draconian. I mean, it was very, very draconian. Arson. Platt MP's cottage arson claim. Nationalist. Police were accused in some quarters of targeting anyone who was a nationalist. Fury. Not used. Fury. Brooks. Flurry. There was a flurry of downloads on its first day of release. Exert. He added. The government exerts a lot of political power in the Northeast. Scatter. Hundreds of documents and unsealed envelopes were scattered all over the table. Imaginative. Instead, they called for imaginative campaigns to boost interest. Betrayal. Anything less is a betrayal of public trust. Arrogance. Labour's arrogance has been their undoing. Inmate. He was keen to know if inmates in Scottish prisons would continue to be allowed to smoke. Mammal. However, all these activities involve the use of dogs to chase wild mammals. Bout. All 10 bouts of the tournament will be played throughout 2005, each one in a different country. Provocation. I will never answer to any provocation from him anymore. Static. That figure had remained static for years. Activate. These have special properties which can be activated in contact with the air or UV light. Cram. This too crams a fully functional phone into a gadget that also plays games. Responsive. The government and its partners would need to be creative and responsive. Frequent. They predicted that damaging storms will become more frequent. Pity. It was a pity. Augment. Any exit strategy must augment and support the democratic process. Kidney. There are a lot of people in the world with one kidney who just don't know it. Penetrate. It is extremely hard to penetrate with our agents. So was the IRA. Migrate. Gamers tend to migrate toward networks with the lowest lag. Doubtful. But Dave Weiner is doubtful. Unsubstantiated. We refute both charges as unsubstantiated and illogical, he said. Provincial. The majority of Ireland and Scotland players have also been released for provincial duty. Breeze. Federer breezes into semi-finals. Cartilage. Blackburn striker Matt Janssen faces 3 weeks out after surgery to treat a cartilage problem. Versatile. The versatile Mladenovic can also play in the back four. Hesitate. The second Southern Hemisphere coach, Rod McQueen, made the approach. I didn't hesitate. Clumsy. Wales critical of clumsy Grewcock. Silverware. It was an amazing climax which gave Mourinho his first silverware as Chelsea manager. Underdog. The French go into the game as clear underdogs. Touchdown. A last-gasp touchdown from Luke Narraway pulled the visitors level. Stroll. Man Utd stroll to cup win. Radius. Vickery has broken the radius. A large bone in his forearm. Forearm. Vickery has broken the radius. A large bone in his forearm. Vacant. Martin was the other name to have been linked to the vacant post alongside Roddick. Immerse. I've brought my family here and we've immersed ourselves in Scottish life. Mighty. But how the mighty have fallen. Umpire. It's raining and the umpire doesn't take control. Intentional. I can tell you it wasn't an intentional headbutt. Limbo. The law is proving controversial and has been in limbo for a year. Populous. His career started at Bullfrog Studios, which in 1987 produced Populous, one of the first God games. Detection. Targeting with the PS2 controller proved tricky, not helped by unconvincing collision detection. Ramp. This sequel gives the franchise a grim, gritty new look and ramps up the action and violence. Ransom. The serious players tend to precede an attack with some kind of ransom email, said Ms. Capella. Journalism. I don't think the mission and role of journalism is threatened. Infant. The genre is in what Milan calls its infant stage. Toxic. Toxic web links help virus spread. Stereo. It can also act as a remote for home theater and stereo systems. Forward. Man auctions add space on forward. Folder. In the latest release of Blinks, the company has added what it calls smart folders. Glitch. Then there was a bit of a glitch in 2000. Simulation. We are a great believer in simulation. Magnetic. What about the magnetic compass? Suffix. But domains that end in the .com suffix are by far the most numerous. Felony. He admitted one felony count of scheming to defraud and faces up to 4 years in prison. Overstate. The firm had been overstating its accounts by $11 billion, £8 and 50 pence. Markedly. Such a secular state would be markedly less tolerant, RT Rev Scott Joint argued. Likelihood. Poverty heightens the likelihood of conflict and unrest. Alleviate. Turkey could also help alleviate a labor shortage in old Europe once its population comes of age. Balloon. U.S. trade gap ballooned in October. Twitch. Bigger markets further afield have barely twitched. Rational. In fact, the markets are being perfectly rational. Placement. The company first sold shares in private placements during 2000 and 2001. Surveyor. Meanwhile, the number of sales dropped 32% to an average of 22 per surveyor. Headache. Asked the reason for the sale, Evans said, "I just want to get rid of it all. It's just a headache." Irregular. And irregular save points mean you have to backtrack each time you are killed. Quadruple. Some are talking about quadruple play, too, with mobile services added into the mix. Stagnant. But officials said stagnant growth was still stifling the job market. Stormy. Stormy year for property insurers. Orderly. For all its faults, corporate Russia has become far more orderly and law-abiding since 2000. Endanger. The fixed-line phone in your home could soon be an endangered species. Reliant. Fox too reliant on reality TV. Choke. He choked late on in the second half when whales were trailing. Dim. Investors took a dim view of the statements though. Redistribution. But the random redistribution effect of rebanding will create a great deal of difficulty. Revolt. A shareholder revolt throughout the old board in 2004. Curtain. They can complain about it, but it is curtains for them. Gasoline. The gains tracked a surge in U.S. gasoline futures to a record high of $1.4850 a gallon. Beneficiary. However, one beneficiary of the desertion of the high street is expected to be online stores. Virtue. In fairness, it has improved and now they are seen as paragons of virtue. Editorial. It says the program breaches editorial guidelines. Evade. GM pays $2 billion to evade fiat buyout. Cautiously. The output figures brought a cautiously optimistic response from economic officials. Tanker. The contract to provide refueling tankers for the U.S. Air Force was cancelled last year. Taint. She might not be urban, but when did R&B become the hip-hop tainted thing it is now? Tower. He said the philosopher was a towering contributor to the modern world. Ponder. Daredevil was blind. Black Panther was black and Silver Surfer pondered the state of humanity. Intellect. We think it's underestimating young people's intellect and level of sophistication. Renewal. Instead, it plans to focus on UK rail renewal, roads and plant hire work. Detach. That is just a way of detaching itself from its political responsibilities. Misconduct. U.S. comedian Bill Cosby will not face charges stemming from an allegation of sexual misconduct. Heighten. Poverty heightens the likelihood of conflict and unrest. Ounce. The IMF has 3,217 tons of gold, or about 113.5 meters ounces. Swallow. Beer giant swallows Russian firm. Cumbersome. They're invariably inaccurate, uncomfortable, and cumbersome to use. Bolt. It came as a bolt out of the blue to us, admitted Lindsay. Equation. And that just isn't going to be there in New York. That's been taken out of the equation. Motto. And he stands by his motto. Courtesy of Michelangelo. Critices by creating. Dose. U.S. politicians and citizens of all political persuasions are in for a dose of shock therapy. Sanitation. Spending on housing and sanitation will rise by 12%. Spice. Storm spices up Man UTD encounter. Formality. However, this is expected to be a formality. Hood. The rumors are that PlayStation 3 will have a little more under the hood than Xbox 2, he said. Confer. All three acts confer cash penalties for each violation of their terms. Designation. It would cost millions if we wanted to introduce a new designation, Mr. Christensen said. Obstruct. The Liberal Democrats have also claimed infighting it's obstructing good government. Momentous. She added. It would be a momentous change and devastating to the arts. Empower. But Dr. Tamimi said MAB's intention was not to empower the Tories. Guardian. Any prizes will be sent to the parent or child's guardian. Staple. Another staple of the firm's business, the sale of ingredients for drugs, also performed poorly. Transitional. It expected 2005 to be a transitional year and to return to profitability in 2006. Breeding. The reserve conducts vital research on both panda breeding and bamboo ecology. Ratification. But Mr. Gaillard told BBC News that the charter came into effect on signature, not ratification. Graft. Prop Jones ready for hard graft. Renaissance. Mr. Wyver is planning a production entitled The Golden Age, about Renaissance art. Comparatively. The comparatively weak economic date preyed on shares with the Nikkei down 1% in afternoon trade. Contradict. Few in Westminster actually believe that, simply because the evidence appears to contradict it. Carnival. Carnival has an incredibly strong track record. Mr. Champion. Nursing. But so far, any emerging policy appears restricted to a limited number of nursing staff. Deceive. Defense lawyers said Mr. Scrushy had been deceived by other executives. Trickery. Ms. Joel said the legislation would ban psychological trickery. Disposable. By contrast, says Mr. Cox, the Mac Mini is almost disposable. Spray. The ink is sprayed on a person's left thumb. Culprit. Now Apple has won the right to see email records from the 3 bloggers to root out the culprit. Upside. On the upside, at least it wasn't Bohemian Rhapsody, for which we should all be thankful. Horn. I'm sorry but I really have to blow my own horn here. Notable. Others notables on the list included Dizzy Rascalin at number 12 and the Zootons at 20. Accustomed. Gone were the screaming girls to which Simpson had become accustomed. Ego. Robert Kilroy Silk's ego and vanity are his own, and his supporters' worst enemy. Vanity. Robert Kilroy Silk's ego and vanity are his own, and his supporters' worst enemy. Trivial. A milder review in the New York Times dubbed the sequel unabashedly trivial. Undercover. He played undercover cop Tommy Hansen in the U.S. series 21 Jump Street for 3 years from 1987. Intriguing. It was another surprise move in Depp's varied and intriguing career. Reunion. He also persuaded punk band the New York Dolls to reform for a reunion show. Irritation. By now Mr. Blair had moved from irritation mode to his barely disguised fury setting. Choreographer. Best Theatre Choreographer Matthew Bourne and Stephen Mear for Mary Poppins at the Prince Edward. Chaotic. At times it felt very chaotic but Mr. Gay was quite clear about what he wanted. Skyscraper. But that world now lies buried under skyscrapers. Closet. Some years ago the Marvel hero, Northstar, came out of the closet. Fatal. It would be a fatal mistake not to take full advantage of the Union safety effect. Coma. He fell into a coma after suffering a stroke during rehearsals for Jules Massenet's Manon last week. Witch. And Spanish daily ABC accuses English reporters of launching a witch hunt against Aragons. Fascinate. Spacey, a double Oscar winner, has long been fascinated by the story of singer Bobby Darin. Hectic. Now in its 3rd year, Bangkok is a relatively recent addition to the hectic film festival calendar. Molest. You don't molest anything that you love. Profession. But this is something we have to do to revitalize the profession and make it more meaningful. Gala. The red carpet gala opening night was ditched in favor of a more subdued first night. Lousy. Da Vinci Code is lousy history. Erupt. Volcano drama erupts on BBC One. Spoil. We were spoiled for choice and it was tough getting down to only 10 from the 301 submitted. Naked. Greer had earlier failed to persuade other contestants to stage a naked protest against Big Brother. Persistently. Individuals who persistently break the law will face a maximum fine of £1,000 Aviator. Aviator creator and Oscars snub. Fatigue. U.S. afflicted with awards fatigue. Adore. Filmmakers haven't produced films that people adore this year, he said. Thrilled. We're thrilled to have him back to direct the newest Bond. Lonely. There's only one #1 spot and it's lonely up there, but it's got the best view. Garner. And Finding Neverland has garnered 2 more nominations for Brits. Mom. Everyone does this, moms. Radicals. Conservatives, he said. Cannibal. Film row over pirates, cannibals. Ancestor. The Caribs have long denied their ancestors practiced cannibalism. Inspired. This is highly unlikely to have been an inspired guess, William Hill spokesman Rupert Adams said. Ballerina. She was one of the first British ballerinas to take a major part in Les Sylphides. Cottage. Platt MP's cottage arson claim. Bike. CJ can commandeer any vehicle he stumbles across, from a push bike to a city bus to a plane. Perpetrator. They should refuse to pay money over to the perpetrators. Firing. The box had come from an area where officers went after being on the firing range. Dinosaur. This is my dinosaur. Brawl. Oasis star fined for German brawl. Hazard. The Prime Minister knows full well the potential hazards. Swipe. Mourinho takes swipe at Arsenal. Polished. Once again. Expect cinematic cutscenes and polished production values. Dear. He went on to reflect on the values that most Britons hold dear. Witty. He was funny and witty to work with. Eagerly. The spring launch of the PSP in the UK is eagerly awaited by gaming fans. Clown. A clown. Pray. This is just what the Europhiles pray for. Dysfunctional. This problem, however, has nothing to do with a dysfunctional sense of reality. Merry. The more the merrier, he says. Treasure. We spent our treasure on weapons instead of hospitals. Confession. Without a confession, the prisoners will get a minimal sentence on some trumped-up charge. Retrospective. A retrospective of his movies was shown. Compassion. Mr. Brown's message generally, that compassion must become action before that hope is squandered. Whine. Here come the usual whines about how difficult it will be for businesses. Mug. It's almost like prisoners rattling the bars with their mugs. Cook explained. Unintentional, he said. I can only hope it is unintentional. Scour. At the same time the virus starts scouring networks for other vulnerable machines. Devoted. They have a devoted fan base in their native Monterey. Dad. The last Downing Street dad was Lord John Russell in 1848. Castle. She heads to a moving castle kept by Howl, a wizard, and searches for a way to become normal again. Beloved. Even the great and good are not immune to losing their beloved gadgets. Fraternity. Pop music pretty much rules the earth, so more attention should go to the other fraternities. Madness. If she were to change her preparation and tactics, that would be madness. Corrosive. Mr. Bannatyne said. Disunity in the cabinet has a corrosive effect on the country. Injustice. Mr. Blair said. I am very sorry that they were subject to such an ordeal and injustice. Gloat. But I doubt whether O'Sullivan is going to gloat about the handling of his players. Repeal. Repealing the hunting bill. Pedestrian. Pedestrians are also out in force, and are a loquacious bunch. Enthusiastic. Mr. Blair is an enthusiastic proponent of talks to bring Turkey within the recently expanded EU. Grieve. The article in the magazine suggested grieving Liverpudlians were wallowing in their victim status. Snowball. How political squabbles snowball. Induce. They also said that file trading firms had some responsibility for inducing people to piracy. Deck. He solidifies the unit, has pace and is powerful in the air and on the deck. Hereditary. In 1999 Labour removed all but 92 of the Lord's 750 hereditary peers. Advocacy. Labour said he had cleverly not asked about paid advocacy. Enquiry. But there were many strange enquiries, including, what is a dog? Waiter. Of course, as a waiter for 10 years I have a professional ability here, he joked. Tedious. When it does not, it is tedious. Spine. Needles get put right close up to my spine. Evangelical. On this subject, Morris appears almost evangelical. Inherent. There is an inherent instability at the moment. Pander. The Lib Dems warned both parties against pandering to prejudice. Wade. Mallon wades into any vote battle. Disturbance. He also chaired the 1969 tribunal set up to investigate civil disturbances in Northern Ireland. Doorstep. That's what I am telling people on the doorstep. Whisper. Ireland can indeed succeed, but just whisper it. Bias. But the Home Secretary said Mr. Howard was wrong to say the law was biased in favor of burglars. Prudent. I have to say he has been a prudent chancellor right the way through. Gimmick. The fear is that the touch screen and voice recognition are treated as little more than gimmicks. Prosperous. The combatants from one-time prosperous mill towns are both founder members of the Football League. Regenerate. You look at some of the people who are involved. They aren't in there to regenerate Blackpool. Outburst. Bellamy's latest outburst would appear to make his chances of a first-team recall remote. Polite. He was very polite. Frighten. But in the days of yore that frightened the life out of any Irishman. Decency. It's not a jobs at any price economy. Goodbye sweatshops, hello decency. Sweeping. There would be no instant sweeping changes to blog lines, said Mr. Lansdowne. Disability. After leaving Northern Ireland in a reshuffle, he became a UK disability minister. Stubborn. This year, Italy opened up with a stubborn display against Ireland but ended up losing 28-17. Mud. The mud got into it, Robinson added. Humiliating. This announcement is a further humiliating retreat by the government. Manslaughter. Balfour Beatty Rail Maintenance faces a corporate manslaughter charge. Flack. He will be leading the domestic debate from the front. Listening. Taking the flak. Biased. Why do you keep putting these obviously biased lists on your site? Intimidation. But anti-Hunt campaigners said there had been widespread intimidation of activists monitoring Hunt's. Idealistic. Mr. Makarov joined the KGB in 1970s Russia, as an idealistic 20-year-old. Faction. The thrust of the game sees the two factions competing to recover pieces of a missing time crystal. Shred. Whitehall shredding increasing Tories. Shameful. Kilroy Silk quits shameful UKIP. Poison. And they have both warned the rival camps to stop spreading the poison. Fascist. We really can't deal with terrorism by turning Britain into a fascist state. Myth. There have been a lot of open secrets about Stephen, most of which have been complete myths. Embryo. However, it is controversial because it involves the destruction of embryos. Lorry. Whatever we do, the public don't like lorries, they see us as a complaining minority. Dawn. But it proved a false dawn, and Ireland reasserted their authority in the final 10 minutes. Scooter. Jansen's career has been dogged by injury since a freak scooter accident 2 years ago. Affluent. In fact, surprisingly more go into postgraduate study than those from more affluent backgrounds. Persecute. There is also evidence that proves the fact that my client has been persecuted. Rot. But fullback Robinson believes the new-look England team can stop the rot against France. Utter rubbish. Prerogative. It's their prerogative for them to arrange a fixture and our prerogative how we handle it. Stimulant. Kuznetsova says the stimulant may have been in a cold remedy she took. Emphatic. Dundee United eased into the semi-final of the Scottish Cup with an emphatic win over Aberdeen. Frenetic. The most turbulent place in this frenetic city is Sport Club Corinthians. Wavelength. It has a shorter wavelength so more data can be stored. Retaliation. Grewcock was sin-binned with Wales captain Gareth Thomas for retaliation. Sting. Worse was to follow though, as an infamous newspaper sting cost him his treasured England captaincy stint. Murambadoro moved to Israel recently after a brief stint with South African club Hellenic. Acquit. A third defendant, Richard Rutkowski, was acquitted. Chant. Were there racist chants against some players? Collision. The striker protested his innocence and referee Mike Riley deemed the collision accidental. Elimination. Winners at these qualifiers get seeded higher in the elimination parts of each tournament. Pot. The winner of the grand final will get a prize purse of $150,000 from a total pot of $500,000. Wit. It would not worry me if I had to pit my wits against Jose. Birth. Dragons 3/4 Hal Luscombe takes Shanklin's wing berth. Relieved. When I did that I was so relieved. There was no pressure. Incense. Why were 10,000 Hearts fans incensed? Needle. Needles get put right close up to my spine. Knit. They make sure it all knits together leaving no gaps. Astonishing. Spam traffic is up by 40%, putting the total amount of email that is junk up to an astonishing 90%. Drawing. Other DS owners can also be sent text messages and drawings. Innovate. It's about innovating to benefit customers, partners and society. Brag. It's basically him bragging that he's one of the best MCs in Spain right now, Milan says. Panoramic. He himself uses mobile phone pictures to create huge panoramic images of events and places. Messy. This is a big messy argument, explained Mr. Hopkins. Likewise, any voter who refuses to be inked will not receive the ballot. Ion. Lithium-ion is never going to get there by itself, he said. Reliability. They are looking for good prices and merchant reliability. Cyberspace. Cyberspace is becoming a very popular destination for Christmas shoppers. Obese. Britain's growing digitally obese. Tablet. In order to have an exact reference to the screen, a pen and tablet device is used. Sequence. Artists can blend together these visual sequences, and include the results in their games. Tin. He added. In essence, it's a laptop in a biscuit tin, minus the screen and the keyboard. Token. Users get a physical token which automatically generates a code which stays active for 60 seconds. Elevator. The key new technologies applied in the world's fastest elevators include Mob. Senior business manager John Walton said, "It has been phenomenal, absolutely mobbed." Powerhouse. The change highlights China's growing importance as an economic powerhouse. Grocery. Sales at restaurants, bars and coffee houses rose by 0.3%, while grocery store sales were up 0.5%. Registered. Almost 200,000 people are registered players on Project Entropia. Touching. I know that this is going to be a very touching and memorable moment, she said. Piecemeal. And he branded the UK government's response to the tsunami as piecemeal and poor. Deplete. The announcement is the latest setback for Robinson's injury-depleted squad. Leftist. The proposals were opposed in the past by leftist parties, including Mr. Leela's Worker Party. Brisk. Tim Dean, director of the Arkansas State University venue, said ticket sales had been brisk. Insecurity. Labor is counting on the politics of fear, ratcheting up talk of threats, crime and insecurity. Practically. I think we have practically reached saturation point. Sometimes I think less is more. Sorrow. Now there is a handful to look back with a mixture of satisfaction and sorrow. Clog. Instead, roads are being clogged by drivers circling in search of a cheaper outdoor option. Edgy. Oracle has an edgy, aggressive atmosphere that's not conducive to innovative production. Afloat. The company is currently kept afloat by the 200-plus banks to whom it owes the money. Diversion. Drink remark acts as diversion. Yawn. But, in many cases, Firms had been forced to top up funds to tackle yawning deficits. Exile. Mr. Nevzlin is UK's largest shareholder but is living in self-imposed exile in Israel. Strap. The tax is designed to provide much-needed revenue for Cuba's cash-strapped economy. Philosopher. He said the philosopher was a towering contributor to the modern world.